In the autumn of 1937, in 15 different states, parents gave their children a sweet red medicine for a sore throat. It tasted like raspberries. A doctor had prescribed it. It came from a real pharmaceutical company in a labeled bottle the way medicine was supposed to. Over the next week or two, the children who took it stopped being able to urinate. Their stomachs filled with pain. They grew confused, then began to convulse. There was no antidote because no one yet understood what was happening to them. The medicine was doing exactly what it had been built to do. The problem was what it had been dissolved in, and the fact that, at that moment, putting it on the market was completely legal. Start with a doctor because a doctor left a record of it. His name was Archibald Calhoun. He practiced in Covington County in southern Alabama. He had earned his medical degree from Tulane in 1911, and by 1937 he had spent more than a quarter of a century treating the same families in the same county. That autumn, he prescribed a new liquid form of a medicine he had used for years, a medicine that, until then, had been one of the genuine miracles of the decade. He prescribed it to patients with ordinary infections, people he knew, and then he watched what happened to them. He wrote it down in a letter in October of 1937, and it is worth hearing in his own words, because it tells you what this disaster actually felt like from the inside. To realize, he wrote, that 6 human beings, all of them my patients, one of them my best friend, are dead because they took medicine that I prescribed for them innocently, and to realize that that medicine which I had used for years in such cases suddenly had become a deadly poison. That realization has given me such days and nights of mental and spiritual agony as I did not believe a human being could undergo and survive. He was not being reckless. He had done nothing wrong by any standard of his profession. He had prescribed a trusted drug, made by a reputable firm for exactly the conditions it treated. And 6 of the people he did it for were dead. The drug itself, sulfanilamide, was not the problem. That is the part that made this so hard to see coming. Sulfanilamide was one of the first drugs that could actually stop a bacterial infection. Before it, a strep infection could kill you and the medicine could only watch. Sulfanilamide changed that. In powder and tablet form, it had been used safely for years. It worked and it was trusted, and that trust was earned. In June of 1937, a salesman for the company that made one version of it, the S.E. Massengill Company in Bristol, Tennessee, reported something back to headquarters. Doctors in the South wanted it as a liquid, something you could pour and swallow, especially for children who struggle with pills. So the company's chief chemist went looking for a way to turn the powder into a syrup. He found that sulfanilamide would dissolve cleanly in a particular solvent. Add raspberry flavoring and you had a sweet red liquid that poured beautifully and tasted good. The company's control lab checked the new mixture. But here's what they checked: flavor, appearance, fragrance. They confirmed it tasted right, looked right, and smelled right. They did not test whether it was safe to drink. And in 1937, nothing required them to. The victims fell ill over about 7 to 21 days. The symptoms were the symptoms of kidneys shutting down, the urine stopping, the abdomen seizing with pain, nausea, vomiting, then stupor and convulsions. Many of the dead were children, being treated for nothing more than a sore throat. The company had already shipped it. 633 separate shipments, sent all across the country, before anyone knew a single person had died. The alarm came from Tulsa, Oklahoma. On the 11th of October, doctors there reported to the American Medical Association that some unfamiliar sulfanilamide compound was killing their patients. The AMA wired the Massengill Company and asked a simple question: what exactly is in this? Then the AMA's own laboratory took the elixir apart to find the poison. And they found it, not in the sulfanilamide, but in the solvent it was dissolved in. The liquid that made the syrup pour so nicely. It was diethylene glycol. Diethylene glycol is antifreeze. It is the sweet, syrupy liquid used to keep engines from freezing. And it is a lethal poison to the human kidney. The chemist who chose it did not know that. He had reached for a solvent that would dissolve the drug and carry a flavor, found one that worked perfectly on all the counts he was measuring, and never asked the one question that wasn't on his list. But here is the part that turns this from an accident into something worse. That poison was not a secret. Studies had already been published in medical journals, showing that diethylene glycol damaged the kidney. The information existed. Anyone could have looked it up. Nobody was required to. Because in 1937 in the United States, selling a brand new drug without testing whether it was safe was not against the law. And there was almost nothing the government could legally do about it. To understand why it killed the way it did, follow the liquid in. Diethylene glycol on its own is not what destroys you. Like a lot of poisons, it needs the body's help. Your liver is built to break down foreign molecules, using enzymes that chop them into smaller pieces to be flushed out. It treats diethylene glycol like anything else, and takes it apart. The problem is what the pieces are. Those enzymes turn the solvent into acidic byproducts, and those acids are the actual poison. It took scientists decades more to pin down exactly which byproduct did the most damage, but the effect in 1937 was already brutally clear. The acids flood the bloodstream and arrive at the kidneys. And the kidney is, at heart, a filter, millions of microscopic filtering units packed together, cleaning the entire blood supply over and over all day. Think of it as the finest strainer in the body, and it works because those units are delicate. The acidic byproducts destroy them. The filtering units die. And once enough of them are gone, the blood stops being cleaned. Waste that should leave the body stays in it. The urine stops. And a person poisoned this way is, in effect, slowly drowning in what their own kidneys can no longer remove. There was no antidote. There still isn't a simple one. In 1937, all a doctor could do was watch. Once the FDA understood what was loose, the problem became arithmetic. More than 240 gallons of a raspberry-flavored poison had been shipped to 15 states, into the hands of doctors and druggists who had passed it on to families whose names, in many cases, no one had written down. Nearly the entire field force of the agency, 239 inspectors and chemists, was put on the single task of finding every bottle. They went through shipping records and sales slips by hand. In one drugstore alone, they checked 20,000 of them. They chased down the company's 200 salesmen across the country. And again, the trail ran into the same wall. A prescription written for Betty Jane, 9 months old, or Mrs. Jackson, with no address. One of the most exact accounts is almost unbearable. An inspector in South Carolina was told by a doctor that he had given the medicine to only 5 people, and none had died. But the inspector asked around town and heard about a mill worker who had. He found the man's sister. Yes, she said, her brother had been given some red medicine before he died, and following local custom, all his medicines had been placed on his grave, out in the fields. The inspector walked with the family 1.5 miles to a wooded rise. On the fresh mound of earth were bottles, dishes, and spoons, and a 4-ounce bottle still holding about 1 ounce of Elixir Sulfanilamide. Of the 240 gallons made, they recovered 234 gallons and 1 pint. The rest had already been swallowed. That missing remainder is essentially the death toll. More than 100 people died. The figure most often cited is 107, across 15 states. A large share of them were children. The company's owner, Dr. Samuel Evans Massengill, issued a statement. It is worth quoting exactly because of what it does not contain. My chemists and I, he said, deeply regret the fatal results, but there was no error in the manufacture of the product. We have been supplying a legitimate professional demand and not once could have foreseen the unlooked-for results. I do not feel that there was any responsibility on our part. He was, by the law of 1937, correct. His company had broken no rule about safety because there was no rule about safety. The chemist who had chosen the solvent did not share his employer's calm. Harold Watkins took his own life. And when the FDA finally reached for a charge, anything to force the recall and hold the company accountable, the only thing they could find in the law was this: the product had been called an elixir. By definition, an elixir contains alcohol, and this one did not. The company was guilty of mislabeling. Not of poisoning more than 100 people, of using the wrong word on the bottle. If they had called it a solution instead of an elixir, there would have been no charge at all. That gap, the one where a company could sell a poison and the government's only weapon was a misspelled category, had been an argument in Congress for years. A bill to close it had been written, debated, and stalled. Everyone agreed the old 1906 Food and Drug Law was obsolete. No one could agree on what should replace it, and so nothing had. The children settled it. In 1938, Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the law that still governs the FDA today. And its central new demand came directly out of this disaster. Before a new drug could be sold, the company had to test it for safety and submit the evidence to the government first. The burden flipped. You no longer got to sell a drug until it was proven dangerous. You had to show it was safe before anyone swallowed it. Almost every modern expectation you have of a medicine, that someone checked it before it reached you, starts here in the autumn of 1937. But the story has one more turn, and it is the reason this particular tragedy never quite ended. When the deaths happened, the FDA asked a laboratory at the University of Chicago to help investigate the poison. On that team was a second-year researcher just beginning her career who spent that year studying exactly how diethylene glycol killed. Her name was Frances Oldham Kelsey. 25 years later, in 1960, Frances Kelsey was a reviewer at the FDA, now armed with the powers that these very deaths had created. A new sedative landed on her desk, already sold across Europe, already considered routine. The company expected a rubber stamp. She refused it. She kept asking for safety data the company did not have, and she would not sign. The drug was thalidomide. In the countries that approved it, it caused thousands of babies to be born with catastrophic malformations. In the United States, it was largely held back, by one reviewer insisting on proof, using authority that existed only because of a raspberry-flavored syrup she had studied as a student. And that near miss did the same thing the first one had. In 1962, Congress strengthened the law again, this time adding that a drug had to be proven not just safe but effective before it could be sold. The same poison. The same person. 2 generations of the rules that decide what you are allowed to be given. Samuel Massengill said he felt no responsibility, and under the law he was right. His chemist felt so much of it that he did not survive it. Neither of them had broken a single safety rule, because there were none to break. So here is the question this case leaves open. When the law permits something that kills 100 people, and the people who did it followed that law exactly, where does the responsibility actually go?
In audio.